I am Sarah Mitchell, 32 years old, and tonight my Wall Street success finally collides with my past. My hands trembled as I remembered my father's cruel words slicing through the air years ago. Useless girl, never the bright one. Now I sit in my luxury car outside my childhood home, gripping my keys tightly. The $15 million secret I have kept is about to shatter their perfect family portrait. Dad's 60th birthday party seems the perfect stage for truth, especially with my brother, their golden child watching. Growing up in Brookfield, an upper-middle-class suburb of Chicago, meant perfectly manicured lawns, competitive parents, and expectations higher than the property taxes. Our brick colonial stood as a testament to academic success, largely because of my father, Robert Mitchell, a tenured economics professor at a prestigious university. His rigid academic standards shaped our home life as thoroughly as they did his classroom. My mother, Catherine, had once been a passionate art teacher with her own small gallery showings, but gradually she gave up her career to support my father's career. Each sacrifice seemed small at first, turning down a showing to attend his faculty dinner, postponing her summer art program to accommodate his research schedule. By the time I was in elementary school, her studio in the basement gathered dust, and her conversations increasingly centered on my father's latest publication or award. Then there was my brother Michael, 2 years older, and blessed with the kind of natural academic brilliance that made multiple-choice tests seem like child's play. He absorbed information like a sponge, regurgitated it perfectly on command, and received the adoration of our father with each report card. The golden child who wore bronze indeed, because despite his academic success, Michael's eyes always held a sadness I would only understand years later. I showed signs of intelligence early, but not the kind my father valued. While Michael memorized state capitals and multiplication tables, I learned to read body language, developed creative solutions to neighborhood problems, and showed an uncanny ability to mediate disputes among friends. My kindergarten teacher noted my exceptional emotional intelligence during a parent-teacher conference. My father responded by asking if she had any concerns about my basic math skills. I still remember that first day of 4th grade clutching my math test with nervous fingers as I walked through our front door. A B+ stared back at me, the highest math grade I had ever received, after struggling through 3 years of anxiety and extra tutoring. Pride bubbled in my chest as I imagined my father's reaction. Maybe this would be the day he would look at me the way he looked at Michael. Dad, look what I got on my math test, I called out, racing into his home office where he sat reviewing papers. He glanced up, his glasses perched low on his nose, and took the paper. B+. Well, that is better than your usual work, Sarah. For one golden moment, hope fluttered in my chest. Then Michael walked in, casually dropping his own math test on the desk. Mr. Peterson said I was the only one to get the bonus question right. My father's entire demeanor transformed, his eyes lighting up as he examined my brother's A+. Exceptional work, Michael. This is the kind of natural talent that will take you places. Then came the comparison that would become the soundtrack of my childhood. Why can't you be more like your brother Sarah? My mother stood in the doorway, witnessing the exchange. Our eyes met, and I saw the flash of pain in hers. But instead of speaking up, she simply squeezed my hand under the dinner table that night as my father spent 20 minutes dissecting Michael's academic achievements. The pattern established itself throughout elementary school. Michael brought home perfect marks and received books, special dinners, and endless praise. I brought home a mixture of grades excelling in reading and social studies, but struggling with math and science, and received helpful suggestions about studying harder. The science fair in 6th grade stands out painfully in my memory. I had created a project examining how different music affected plant growth, meticulously tracking results, and developing a hypothesis about sound vibrations and cellular development that went beyond the typical 6th grade understanding. Michael had created a textbook perfect volcano, the same project thousands of students had done before. His erupted on cue. He took first place. Your project was too subjective, Sarah, my father explained as we drove home. My participation ribbon mocking me from the back seat, while Michael's blue ribbon sat prominently on the dashboard. Science requires precision and adherence to established principles. Your methodology was creative but flawed. What he never realized was that I had found my own academic interest. At 12, I discovered the financial section of the newspaper he left scattered on the kitchen table each morning. While the words initially seemed like a foreign language, something about the patterns and predictions fascinated me. I began tracking stocks mentioned in articles, creating my own paper portfolio in a notebook hidden under my mattress. One morning at breakfast, I made the mistake of sharing my first prediction. Dad, I think that technology company you mentioned yesterday is going to increase in value. Their new product solves a problem people don't even know they have yet. He lowered his newspaper just enough to look at me with amusement. And what would you know about market analysis, Sarah? I've been reading the financial section, and I noticed that whenever companies develop solutions to invisible problems, their stock usually rises within 6 months. When my prediction proved accurate 3 months later, the stock rising 20% after their product announcement, I eagerly showed him the newspaper. Lucky guess, he said, before turning to quiz Michael about his debate club preparation. That moment taught me something valuable. My father would never see what he wasn't looking for. So I stopped seeking his approval and started developing my financial understanding in private. High school brought new challenges and deeper wounds. I found my academic niche in economics class, where concepts that baffled other students seemed intuitive to me. I could look at market trends and see patterns connections that others missed between seemingly unrelated events. But chemistry continued to confuse me. Literature analysis felt subjective and frustrating, and the B's and occasional C's on my report card ensured I remained the academic disappointment at home. Meanwhile, Michael flourished. He became valedictorian captain of the debate team and president of the Honor Society. My father attended every debate competition sitting front row and beaming with unrestrained pride as Michael dismantled opposing arguments with surgical precision. The trophy shelf in our living room grew crowded with Michael's achievements, while my economics competition certificate lay buried in my desk drawer. My economics teacher, Mr. Davidson, was the first to recognize my unique insight. After I accurately predicted a market shift for our class simulation that resulted in my virtual portfolio outperforming everyone else's by a significant margin, he pulled me aside. Sarah, you have a natural talent for market analysis that I rarely see even in undergraduate students. Have you considered pursuing economics in college? His words were the first academic validation I had received, and they lit a fire inside me. With his encouragement, I started a small investment club at school. 6 of us pooled our allowance and part-time job money, creating a modest fund of $3,000 that I managed based on my market research. By the end of the school year, we had increased our capital by 30%, enough to draw attention from the school newspaper, but not enough to impress my father. The defining moment came during my junior year. Michael had reached the state finals for debate, scheduled the same weekend as the regional economics competition, where I would be representing our school. Without hesitation, my parents chose to attend Michael's event. He is competing at the state level, Sarah, my mother explained gently. This is important for his college applications. I won first place at the economics competition. When I called home with the news, my mother answered and offered congratulations before quickly returning to her detailed account of Michael's second-place finish at the debate tournament. My trophy joined my certificate in the desk drawer. College application season brought the tension to a breaking point. Michael received acceptance letters from Harvard, Princeton, and Yale, each one displayed proudly on the refrigerator. I applied to 7 schools, including my father's alma mater, hoping my strong economics grades and competition wins might finally earn his approval. The rejection letter from his university arrived on a Tuesday. Despite my above-average grades and exceptional economics performance, I had not made the cut. I hid the letter in my room, but somehow my father found out, perhaps from a colleague on the admissions committee. That night at dinner, he cleared his throat as my mother served pot roast. Michael conspicuously absent at a study group. I heard you were rejected by my university today. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Yes, but I still have other options. State University has a good business program, and they offered me a partial scholarship. He scoffed, cutting his meat with precise movements. State University accepts anyone with a pulse. Their business program is mediocre at best. Their finance track is actually highly rated. I countered, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. Let us be realistic, Sarah. You will never be the bright one in this family. Michael has the academic potential to make something of himself. You should consider a practical degree that plays to your strengths. Perhaps something in social work or elementary education. The words hit like physical blows. I excused myself from the table and fled to my room, tears burning tracks down my cheeks. Later, my mother knocked softly and entered without waiting for a response. "Your father means well," she said, perching awkwardly on the edge of my bed. "He just wants you to have realistic expectations. He wants me to know I'm a disappointment." I corrected my voice flat. She had no response to that truth, simply patting my hand before leaving. The next morning, I informed my parents I would be attending State University's business program in the fall. My father's response was immediate and cold. "I will not waste money on a school that accepts anyone. If that is your choice, you can finance it yourself." That summer, I worked at a local bank as a teller. The branch manager, Mrs. Rodriguez, noticed my skill with numbers and my interest in the financial magazines I read during breaks. She began teaching me about personal finance during slow periods, showing me how the banking system operated from the inside. "You have a good mind for this work," she told me one afternoon. "Most people see numbers. You see possibilities." The night before I left for college, my mother slipped into my room and pressed an envelope into my hand. Inside was $5,000, nearly her entire personal savings. "I believe in you," she whispered, hugging me tightly. "Show them what you can do." And I left home the next morning with her money, my own savings from the bank job, and a determination to prove my father wrong that burned brighter than any academic passion ever could. Arriving at State University felt like stepping into freedom. For the first time, no one compared me to Michael. No one had preconceived notions about my intelligence or potential. The campus sprawled across a 100 acres old brick buildings, mingling with modern structures, all of it representing possibility. My roommate Jessica was everything I needed without knowing it, a communications major with bright purple hair and an infectious laugh. She accepted me immediately and completely. "Girl who cares what your family thinks," she said one night after I confessed my father's words over cheap pizza in our dorm room. "College is where you figure out who you are, not who they want you to be." Financial reality meant working 3 jobs while maintaining a full course load. Mornings in the campus library, evenings waitressing at a local restaurant, and weekends as a virtual assistant for an investment blog. Every dollar went toward tuition books or my growing investment fund. My first finance class introduced me to Professor Maria Santos, a former Wall Street analyst who had left the high-pressure world to teach. While other professors lectured from textbooks, she brought real-world scenarios and challenged us to think beyond conventional wisdom. After I questioned one of her assertions about market behavior during class, citing 3 recent examples that contradicted traditional theory, she asked me to stay after class. "Most students just accept what I say because it is in the textbook," she said, studying me with sharp eyes. "You actually analyze and verify. That is rare." Tom, my mentor, recognizing that my approach to financial analysis differed from traditional methods. While other students focused exclusively on balance sheets and historical performance, I incorporated social trends, technological developments, and cultural shifts into my market predictions. "You have an unconventional mind, Sarah," Professor Santos told me during my junior year. "You see connections others miss because you look beyond the numbers. That is both a gift and a liability in this field." My first real investment came from the $2,000 I had saved from my campus jobs. Against conventional advice, I invested in a tech startup that specialized in social media analytics, a company most analysts overlooked because of its modest beginning and unconventional business model. Within 8 months, my investment had tripled in value as larger corporations began recognizing the value of social media data. That $6,000 paid for my next semester's tuition and validated my approach. Throughout college, I built a small but growing portfolio, reinvesting profits and adding whatever I could save from my jobs. Professor Santos introduced me to investment literature not covered in our courses. and I spent hours analyzing market patterns, developing my own system for predicting trends based on both financial data and social observations. During my senior year, Professor Santos recommended me for an internship at a regional investment firm. There, I met Linda Thompson, a senior analyst who had fought her way up in the male-dominated financial world of the 1980s and 90s. "Finance is still a boys' club," she warned me during my first week. "You will have to be twice as good to get half the recognition. Are you prepared for that, Sarah?" I thought of my father's dismissals, my brother's effortless success, and the years of proving myself. I have been preparing my whole life. Linda took me under her wing, teaching me the practical side of client management and institutional investing that complemented my theoretical knowledge. More importantly, she showed me how to navigate professional spaces where men automatically assumed my incompetence. I graduated with highest honors in finance, my personal portfolio now worth $50,000. A secret nest egg no one in my family suspected. They attended the graduation ceremony, my father looking distinctly uncomfortable in the state school environment. "Congratulations," he said stiffly at the restaurant afterward. Though I suppose state school honors are not quite the same as Ivy League achievements. Michael, now in his second year of law school at Harvard, at least had the grace to look embarrassed by our father's comment. When I announced I had accepted a position at a prestigious firm in New York, my father simply nodded. "Entry-level paper pushing will be a good start. Perhaps in time you can work your way up to something substantive." I left for New York the following week. My $50,000 portfolio and Linda's recommendation my only real assets. The last thing my father said as I pulled out of the driveway was advice to keep expectations realistic. I smiled and waved already, knowing my reality would exceed anything he could imagine. My first apartment in New York was a tiny studio in Brooklyn with a shower so small I had to wash my hair with my elbows pressed against the walls. The hour-long commute to Manhattan's financial district ate into my sleep. But stepping into those gleaming towers each morning made every sacrifice worthwhile. I had arrived in the epicenter of global finance, and no one here knew I was supposed to be the disappointment. The investment firm placed me in an entry-level analyst position, part of a team of 20 new hires evaluating potential opportunities for senior advisors. Most of my colleagues came from Ivy League schools, their confidence bolstered by family connections and prestigious degrees. They initially dismissed me, the state school graduate with the unfashionable shoes and homemade lunches. 3 months into the job, we were asked to prepare investment recommendations for an upcoming pitch meeting. I identified a pattern in social media usage that suggested a particular platform was poised for explosive growth, despite its current modest performance. My analysis combined traditional metrics with data about changing user demographics and engagement patterns. When I presented my findings in the team meeting, the senior executives exchanged skeptical glances. "That is an interesting theory, Miss Mitchell," said Mr. Johnson, the department head. "But we prefer investments with established performance records. Your social media hunch is too speculative for our client profiles." They selected the safe traditional options for the client presentation. That night, I used $10,000 from my personal portfolio to invest in the company they had rejected. 6 months later, that social media platform announced partnership deals with 3 major corporations, and their stock price increased by 300%. Meanwhile, the firm's recommended investments had yielded an average 8% return. I did not gloat or mention my personal investment. Instead, I continued developing my hybrid analysis method, combining traditional financial metrics with social trend analysis and technological innovation patterns. I kept 2 sets of investment recommendations, one for the firm's conservative approach, and one for my growing personal portfolio. My breakthrough came when Daniel Williams, a senior partner who managed high net worth accounts, overheard me discussing market trends with a colleague in the break room. Something in my analysis caught his attention, and he invited me to share my thoughts on several positions in his client portfolios. When 3 of my predictions proved remarkably accurate, he began consulting me regularly, though informally. After my personal portfolio outperformed the firm's official selections for the 4th consecutive quarter, he called me into his office. "You have an unusual approach, Sarah. he said, leaning back in his leather chair. Unconventional, but I cannot argue with results. I'm assigning you to my team effective immediately. That promotion at 26 made me the youngest senior analyst at the firm, with a small portfolio of clients and a substantial raise. I moved to a better apartment, invested my bonuses, and began building a reputation for accurate, if unorthodox, market predictions. Over the next 2 years, I developed an investment algorithm that quantified my analytical approach, combining traditional financial indicators with social media sentiment analysis, technological adoption rates, and cultural trend forecasting. My client portfolio consistently outperformed market averages by significant margins. My personal investments grew exponentially as I applied my methodology with greater freedom than the firm allowed. By 28, my net worth had crossed the $1 million mark, a fact I shared with no one, especially not my family. Visits home became increasingly rare, limited to major holidays and the occasional family event. My parents' house, once the center of my universe, now felt stifling and small. My father still introduced me as our daughter, who works for a company in New York, while speaking at length about Michael's cases at his prestigious law firm. Still pushing papers in the big city? My father asked during one Christmas visit as Michael detailed his recent court victory. Something like that. I answered, not mentioning that I now managed a $100 million portfolio for the firm's wealthiest clients. At 28, I made the decision that would transform my career. Using my market insights industry connections and $800,000 of my own money, I launched Strategic Insights Capital, a boutique investment firm specializing in identifying emerging market opportunities others missed. The first year was brutal. I worked 18-hour days, slept on the office couch, and poured every cent into building the business. Traditional clients were skeptical of my youth, my gender, and my unconventional methods. For every 10 pitches, I might land one small account. The turning point came when Ryan Cooper, a tech entrepreneur who had recently sold his company for $30 million, decided to trust me with $5 million for investment. He had read about my market predictions in an industry newsletter and recognized the same pattern recognition abilities that had made him successful. The old guard is too attached to what worked yesterday. He told me during our first meeting, I want someone who sees what will work tomorrow. His portfolio grew by 60% in the first year. Word spread, and suddenly, Strategic Insights Capital had a waiting list of clients, eager for my perspective. I hired a team of analysts trained in my methodology, expanded to larger offices, and found myself managing over $500 million in assets by my 31st birthday. The Wall Street Journal feature came later that year. The Social Oracle of Wall Street: How Sarah Mitchell's Unconventional Methods Are Rewriting Investment Rules. The article detailed my unique approach and remarkable success rate, accompanied by a professional photo of me in my corner office with the Manhattan skyline behind me. I kept a copy of that article locked in my desk drawer, but never sent it to my parents. They still believed I worked for an investment company, with no idea that I owned the firm or that my personal net worth had crossed $15 million. I bought a luxury condo in Manhattan with floor-to-ceiling windows and views of Central Park. While they assumed I rented a nice apartment, each Christmas I downplayed my success, deflected questions about my career, and listened to my father praise Michael's law practice, which had plateaued at a respectable but unexceptional level. I drove a rented economy car when visiting home, wore simple clothes, and never mentioned the celebrity clients or hedge fund managers who sought my advice. When the invitation arrived for my father's 60th birthday party, I knew the charade had gone on long enough. 10 years of invisible success of swallowing his dismissals while building an empire had created a weight I could no longer carry. It was time for the reckoning. The drive to my parents' house took 90 minutes from the city each mile, ratcheting up my anxiety. I had deliberately chosen to drive my actual car, a luxury vehicle worth more than my parents' mortgage. Its sleek lines and distinctive logo impossible to miss. As I pulled into their driveway, the contrast between my life and theirs became visually apparent. Their modest colonial, once the palace of my childhood, now seemed small compared to my Manhattan condo. I sat in the car for several minutes, gripping the steering wheel, rehearsing what I might say when the inevitable questions came. The $15 million secret felt like it might choke me. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed the expensive bottle of champagne from the passenger seat and walked to the front door. My mother answered, her face lighting up with genuine pleasure. "Sarah, you made it!" She hugged me tightly, then held me at arm's length. "You look wonderful, so professional in that suit." What she did not say, but I could read in her expression, was surprise at the quality of my clothing. The simple black suit was designer, its perfect tailoring and fabric quality evident to anyone with an eye for such things. "Nice car," she added, glancing past me to the driveway. I swallowed hard. "No, Mom, it is mine." Before she could process that information, my father appeared in the hallway behind her. "Sarah, good of you to come." His greeting was perfunctory, his eyes already moving past me to check the time on his watch. "Most of the guests will arrive at 7. I followed them into the living room, noticing how little had changed over the years. The same furniture, the same family photos, the same trophy shelf dominated by Michael's achievements. My economics competition certificate had never made it onto that display. My brother Michael and his wife Jennifer arrived 20 minutes later. Despite our complicated history, I had always liked Michael himself, understanding that he had been as trapped by our father's expectations as I had been dismissed by them. We hugged, and he looked genuinely happy to see me. "The New York life must agree with you," he said. "You look great." My father immediately engaged Michael in conversation about a recent case, leaving me and Jennifer to make small talk about their children. The pattern was so familiar, it almost made me laugh. Some things never changed. As we gathered for pre-dinner drinks, my father held court in the living room, showcasing Michael's recent victory in a minor corporate case, as though he had argued before the Supreme Court. The opposing counsel never saw it coming. My father boasted to the small group of his university colleagues who had arrived. Michael found a precedent from 1978 that completely invalidated their argument. When one of the guests politely asked what I did, my father answered before I could open my mouth. "Sarah works for an investment firm in New York, still doing that stock thing, right?" I smiled tightly. "Something like that." The doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of Professor Anderson, one of my father's oldest colleagues, accompanied by his wife Susan and their son James, who appeared to be in his early 30s. As my mother made introductions, James stopped abruptly when she reached me. "Sarah Mitchell?" he asked, his eyes widening. "From Strategic Insights Capital." The room fell suddenly quiet. My father frowned slightly, looking between us with confusion. "Yes," I answered, my heart pounding. "Do we know each other?" James shook his head, a smile spreading across his face. "Not personally, but I just finished reading your profile in Forbes, the Wall Street wonder who revolutionized predictive investment strategies. Your firm's returns are legendary in financial circles." My father's face paled visibly. "There must be another Sarah Mitchell." James was already pulling out his phone. "No, it is definitely your daughter. I recognized her immediately." He turned the screen to show the group my Forbes cover photo, where I stood confidently in front of the New York Stock Exchange. "See Sarah Mitchell, the future of finance." My mother gasped softly, her hand covering her mouth. "But you said you worked at an investment company." "I own an investment company," I corrected gently. "Strategic Insights Capital. We manage just over $1 billion in assets now." Michael stepped forward, genuine surprise and what looked like admiration on his face. "That is incredible! Sarah, why did you never tell us?" My father had recovered enough to attempt damage control. "It must be exaggerated for the article. These business magazines like to create celebrities." James, oblivious to the family tension, continued enthusiastically. "Exaggerated hardly. Her firm had the highest returns in the industry last quarter. My father's retirement fund manager has been trying to become a client for months, but I heard there is a waiting list now." The uncomfortable silence that followed was broken by my mother announcing dinner was ready. As we moved to the dining room, I could feel the weight of unspoken questions pressing down on all of us. Once seated, my father attempted to regain control of the narrative. "Sarah has always been modest about her accomplishments. Perhaps now she can tell us more about this company of hers." The forced smile and patronizing tone snapped something inside me. 10 years of diminishment and dismissal crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. My company manages over $1 billion in assets, I said evenly, looking directly at my father. My personal net worth is approximately $15 million. I own a condo overlooking Central Park and sit on the boards of 3 financial industry organizations. I was named one of the 40 most influential people in finance, under 40 last year. The stunned silence that followed was broken by my father's defensive question, "Why would you hide this from your family?" The dinner table confrontation I had imagined for years was finally happening, and with an audience no less. Years of suppressed emotion rose to the surface, threatening to overwhelm my carefully constructed professional composure. "Hide it," I repeated, my voice rising slightly. "I didn't hide anything. You never asked. You were too busy praising Michael to notice anything about my career beyond that stock thing in New York." My mother reached for my hand across the table. "Sarah, we had no idea." "That was the problem," I continued, unable to stop now that the dam had broken. "You never thought to look past what you decided I was capable of when I was 12 years old. Dad labeled me never the bright one, and that became the family truth." My father's face flushed dark red. "That is not fair. I always supported your education. You refused to help pay for college because State University accepts anyone with a pulse," I reminded him. "You called my career entry-level paper pushing the last time I visited." Professor Anderson and his family looked deeply uncomfortable, while Michael sat with his head bowed, staring at his plate. My mother had tears streaming silently down her cheeks. I stood abruptly, grabbing my purse and keys. I should go. This was a mistake. As I headed for the door, I could hear my father calling after me, but the roaring in my ears drowned out his words. I had imagined this moment for years, but the reality left me feeling hollow rather than vindicated. The $15 million secret was out, but revealing it had not brought the satisfaction I had expected. I made it to my car in the driveway, but my hands were shaking too badly to insert the key into the ignition. Tears blurred my vision as I gripped the steering wheel, trying to regain control of my breathing. The expensive leather interior of my luxury car suddenly felt confining rather than comforting. A knock on the passenger window startled me. Michael stood there, his expression worried. After a moment's hesitation, I unlocked the door. He slid into the seat beside me, whistling low under his breath. "Nice car. Much better than my practical family sedan." Despite everything, I found myself laughing through my tears. "It gets terrible gas mileage." We sat in silence for a moment before he spoke again. "I didn't know, Sarah, about the company, the success, any of it. But more importantly, I didn't know how badly Dad hurt you all these years." "It doesn't matter," I said automatically, the dismissive response I had trained myself to give whenever anyone noticed the family dynamic. "It obviously does matter," Michael countered gently. "You just blew up 15 years of carefully hidden success at Dad's birthday dinner. That suggests it matters quite a lot." He was right, of course. I stared out the windshield at the house where we had grown up, the windows glowing warm in the evening darkness. "Can I tell you something I have never told anyone?" Michael asked, his voice unusually hesitant. "I have always been jealous of you." I turned to stare at him in disbelief. "Jealous of the family disappointment?" He nodded, a sad smile crossing his face. "You got away. You built your own life, followed your own path. I have been living the life Dad planned for me since I was 10 years old. Harvard undergraduate, Harvard Law, corporate firm partner track. I hate corporate law, Sarah. I have hated it every day for the past 7 years." "Then why stay?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Because disappointing Dad terrifies me. The thought of losing his approval feels like falling off a cliff." Michael ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so familiar from our childhood that it made my heart ache. "You had the courage to walk away from his expectations. I never did." His confession shifted something fundamental in my understanding of our family. The golden child had been trapped in a gilded cage of expectations, while I had been free to find my own way. Painful as that journey had been. "We should go back inside," I said finally. Running away doesn't solve anything. I have been doing that for 10 years. Together, we walked back to the house where our parents waited in tense silence, the birthday dinner in ruins. Professor Anderson and his family had tactfully excused themselves, promising to return another time. My father stood in the living room, looking older and smaller than I remembered. My mother sat on the sofa, her makeup streaked from crying. I think, I said carefully, that we need to have a conversation that is about 15 years overdue. My father drew himself up, defensive posture already in place. I don't understand why you would hide your success from us. Were you trying to make us look foolish? No, Dad. I was trying to protect myself from exactly the reaction you had at dinner. Dismissal, disbelief. The assumption that whatever I achieved must be exaggerated or unimportant. I never said your achievements were unimportant, he protested. You never acknowledged them at all, I corrected. When I won the economics competition in high school, you missed it for Michael's debate tournament. When I graduated with honors, you called them state school honors as if they meant less. When I got my first job in New York, you called it entry-level paper pushing. Michael stepped forward. She is right, Dad. You have always measured both of us against your own narrow definition of success. For me, that meant pressure to excel exactly as you had. For Sarah, it meant constant reminders that she would never be the bright one. My father looked genuinely startled. I never said that. You did, my mother said quietly, surprising us all. At dinner, after she was rejected by your alma mater, you said those exact words, and I sat there and let you say them to our daughter. The silence that followed her statement was profound. My mother rarely contradicted my father, and never about his treatment of us. I failed you both, she continued, looking between Michael and me. I let your father define success so narrowly that neither of you'd ever had a chance to just be yourselves. I gave up my own career, my art to support his, and then watched him do the same thing to both of you. My father sank slowly into his armchair, the weight of his wife's words visibly affecting him. I pushed because I wanted you both to succeed, he said finally. Everything I did was to ensure you had the best opportunities. No, I replied, finding strength in the simple truth. You pushed because you wanted us to succeed in ways that validated your own choices. My success came not because of your pushing, but despite it. I succeeded because I finally stopped trying to be what you wanted and started being who I actually am. I took out my phone and pulled up my company website, showing him the press coverage, the performance records, the industry recognition. This is what I built while you were dismissing my career as that stock thing in New York. I have clients who manage billion-dollar hedge funds. I advise tech entrepreneurs and Fortune 500 companies. And not once in 10 years did you ever ask me a single substantive question about my work. For the first time in my life, I saw something break in my father's expression, his perpetual certainty cracking to reveal doubt and perhaps regret. I did not know, he said, his voice uncharacteristically small. You did not ask, I corrected. Michael placed his hand on my shoulder in silent support. Dad, I have something to tell you too. I hate being a corporate lawyer. I have always wanted to teach. I have been offered a position at the law school, and I am going to take it. My father looked up startled. But your partnership track is making me miserable, Michael finished firmly. Just like your narrow expectations made Sarah miserable for years. My mother rose and came to stand between us, taking both our hands. I think it is time we all started being honest with each other. Robert, you and I need therapy both as a couple and as parents. We need to learn how to support our children's actual dreams, not the dreams we projected onto them. My father looked around at the three of us, united for perhaps the first time in standing up to his rigid expectations. I expected anger, dismissal, or defensiveness. Instead, he simply looked tired and suddenly much older than 60. I never meant to hurt either of you, he said finally. I thought I was doing what was best. I thought you knew better than everyone else, my mother finished gently. But you were wrong, Robert. Look at what Sarah has accomplished without your guidance. Look how unhappy Michael has been following it. Can we start over? My father asked the question, directed primarily at me. Can we try to build something different? It was not the sweeping apology I had sometimes imagined, but the vulnerability in the question was something I had never heard from him before. Not start over, I said carefully, but maybe start from here with the truth, all of it. That includes clear boundaries about how you speak to me and acknowledging who I actually am, not who you decided I was. My father nodded slowly. I would like that. We moved to the dining room, the forgotten birthday dinner now cold on our plates. As we reheated food and poured fresh drinks, the conversation gradually shifted. For the first time, my father asked detailed questions about my investment methodology, listening with genuine interest to my explanations of how I combine traditional analysis with social trend forecasting. It is unconventional, Nate, he admitted, but clearly effective. You always did see connections others missed. That small acknowledgement, 10 years too late, but finally given, felt like a door opening between us. Happy birthday, Dad, I said, raising my glass in a toast. To new beginnings. He met my eyes across the table, and for the first time in my adult life, I saw what might have been pride in his gaze. To new beginnings, Nikiking, he echoed, and to the daughter I failed to see clearly for too long. It was not a perfect resolution, but it was a start. The wall of silence and dismissal had finally cracked, letting in the possibility of something better. 6 months after my father's birthday dinner revelation, we sat in a therapist's office in Chicago, our 4th family session. The healing process had been neither quick nor easy, but change was happening in small, significant increments. My father had begun the difficult work of acknowledging his harmful patterns, particularly his tendency to value only one narrow type of achievement and to withhold approval as a form of control. In our 2nd session, he had broken down while recounting how his own father had treated him the same way. I became the very thing I hated, he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. I measured both of you against impossible standards because that was all I knew. My mother had found her voice again, both literally and figuratively. She had reopened her art studio in the basement and begun teaching classes at the community center. Small changes at first, but her increasing willingness to express her own needs and opinions had transformed the dynamic between them. I enabled the favoritism for years, she acknowledged during one particularly difficult session. By staying silent, I became complicit in the harm it caused. Michael had made the boldest external change, leaving his corporate law position to accept a teaching role at the university. The dramatic cut in salary had been offset by an equally dramatic increase in his happiness and well-being. The perpetual tension he had carried in his shoulders since childhood had finally eased. For the first time in my life, I am not performing for anyone's approval, he told me over coffee one afternoon. I'm just doing what I love. My own journey had been more internal than external. I maintained clear boundaries with my parents, limiting visits and calls to what felt comfortable while remaining open to the new relationship slowly forming. I created a scholarship fund for unconventional business thinkers at State University, specifically targeting students who showed market insight but might not excel in traditional academic metrics. Through my company, I established a mentorship program for young women in finance. Remembering how Linda's guidance had been crucial to my early career, twice monthly, I met with promising female analysts and shared both technical knowledge and strategies for navigating the still male-dominated financial world. My relationship with my parents gradually transformed into something authentic rather than performative. We would never have the easy closeness some families enjoyed, but the pretense and dismissal had been replaced by careful honesty. My father no longer introduced me as our daughter who works in New York, but instead spoke with genuine, if still learning pride about my financial innovations. 3 months after our therapy began, my father attended an industry awards ceremony where I received recognition for my firm's performance. Watching him from the podium, I saw him applaud with genuine enthusiasm, no longer threatened by a type of success different from his own. The following month, I attended my mother's first art showing in 20 years, purchasing her largest canvas for my office conference room. The abstract piece, titled Renaissance, symbolized her own rebirth, as much as our family's healing process. As I reflected on our journey during a quiet moment in my Manhattan condo, I realized how much I had learned about different forms of intelligence and success. My father's narrow academic definition had nearly broken our family, but in pushing against it, I had discovered my own unique talents. The validation I had sought from him for so many years had ultimately needed to come from within. External recognition, even $15 million worth, could not fill the hole left by parental dismissal. Only internal confidence and self-acceptance could do that. A lesson I now shared with the young women I mentored. Our family healing remained a work in progress, not a finished journey with a tidy conclusion. There were still difficult moments, old patterns that emerged in times of stress wounds that reopened unexpectedly. But we now had tools to address these challenges directly rather than retreating into established roles of golden child and disappointment. I created new traditions that honored everyone's unique gifts. For Christmas, I commissioned a family portrait where each of us was depicted with symbols of our passions and achievements, my mother with her art, my father with his books, Michael with his students, and me with subtle references to my financial innovations. It hung in my parents' living room, a visual reminder of our commitment to seeing each other fully. The final breakthrough came during a dinner at my parents' home nearly a year after the confrontation. My father had invited a new colleague from the university, and as we gathered in the living room for drinks, he introduced me with words I never thought I would hear from him. "This is my daughter, Sarah," he said, his voice carrying a note of genuine pride. "She founded an investment firm that is revolutionizing how we understand market behavior. Her approach combines economic principles with social insight in ways I never considered during my teaching career. We learn from her now." Later that evening, as I prepared to leave, my father walked me to my car. "I want you to know," he said hesitantly, "that I am proud of you. Not because of the money or the recognition, but because you had the courage to follow your own path, even when I tried to discourage you." "Thank you," I said simply. The words I had longed to hear for decades finally spoken aloud. As I drove back to the city that night, I reflected on how authenticity had ultimately freed everyone in our family. My success had forced a reckoning that allowed Michael to escape the golden cage of expectations. My mother had reclaimed her artistic voice. Even my father had found a more genuine way of relating to his children. I had written my own definition of success, one that incorporated financial achievement, but extended beyond it to include authentic relationships, personal growth, and lifting others through mentorship. The $15 million secret had never been about the money at all, but about the courage to become fully myself despite every discouragement. The truth that emerged from our family's painful journey was both simple and profound. No one else can define your worth or potential. The labels others place on you have power only if you accept them. And sometimes the greatest success comes from proving wrong those who never believed you could succeed. Have you ever felt underestimated by someone whose opinion mattered to you? How did you respond to that challenge? Share your story in the comments below. If this journey of overcoming family expectations resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and redemption. Remember that your unique talents are valuable even when others fail to see them. Thank you for joining me on this deeply personal journey, and I wish you the courage to define success on your own terms. Story 2. With inebriated laughing, my wife confessed, "I don't dream of a man like you." So I said nothing and did one thing that broke her idyllic life. I thus met my soulmate. Olivia is a 28-year-old college student. She was one of those folks who never seemed to try too hard and were always cool. But for her, it all simply worked out somehow. She was constantly giggling, surrounded by people, and the one with the wild last-minute idea for something entertaining. Studying hard was more my style. Get a good job. Create a kind for the future. For a time it worked, despite the fact that we were different. I fell deeply in love with him when we began dating in our junior year. Everything seemed exhilarating because of her. Before I met her, I felt like I was losing out on life because of the way she exuded energy. I thought, yeah, this is it. When we moved in together after graduating, I will live my entire life with this individual. Let's fast forward several years. We were married. In addition to having a respectable job, I was making every effort to create a secure future for us. Olivia, meanwhile, was still attempting to make sense of the situation. She experimented with a variety of pastimes and careers, but she never truly committed to any of them. I was okay with that. I earned enough money to comfortably support us both, and I was more than prepared to wait if she needed some time to figure out what made her happy. But eventually, things began to change. It was little at start, with a new explanation every time she would arrive home later and later. Lost sight of time got sucked into work or went out for a drink with pals. At first, I didn't give it much thought. She was outgoing. She had a large social circle. I didn't want to be the person that gets really upset if his girlfriend goes out late. However, when it became more frequent, the reasons began to seem implausible, as if she were merely making them. She would give me the most generic response when I asked how her night had gone, as if everything was okay, and then quickly shift the topic. Then there was the rest of it. The way she no longer touched me at all. How she ceased grabbing my hand whenever we went anywhere. When we sat on the couch together, she would lean into me. She would hardly acknowledge me while she sat on the other end browsing through her phone. It was only a phase, I kept telling myself. Perhaps she was under stress. Perhaps she was uncomfortable and unsure of how to express it. I made an effort to ease her burden, brought her favorite takeaway home, and organized a quick romantic night. When she wanted space, they even gave it. However, it pushed her farther away rather than drawing her back. I cooked dinner one evening. It was simple, but I knew she enjoyed it. When I contacted her to inquire when she would be home, she replied that she will be there shortly. It was 7 p.m. I was seated at the table by myself by 10 o'clock, gazing at her unfinished dish. At midnight, she finally entered. Didn't even appear shocked that I was still conscious. She said, "Oh, hey," as if it were nothing. She gave me a quick, scarcely perceptible peck on the cheek before heading directly to the bedroom. She didn't inquire as to why I remained awake. Didn't even recognize that she had brushed me off, let alone inquire why I was looking unhappy. That night, I became acutely aware that something was really wrong. I remained silent for a while. I simply watched and listened. She seemed to smile more at her phone than at me. She always seemed to have plans, but she never asked me to accompany her. She was constantly texting someone, and if I looked over, she was only slightly averting her screen. I wasn't a moron. I was aware that something was happening. I so made the decision to try things out before addressing her. I began to initiate contact. I was the first to cease messaging her. To test if she would ever share anything on her own, I stopped asking her about her day. She didn't. She didn't even seem to notice. Or perhaps she did and didn't give a damn. I began to doubt myself at that point as uncertainty began to sneak in. What had I done wrong? I went over our times together again, looking for the clues I must have overlooked. Perhaps from the beginning, I had been deceiving myself, seeing what I wanted to see instead of what was actually there. Now I remembered all of her little remarks, which I smiled and brushed aside. "Jake, you're such a planner." I had never felt the weight of each word before. "You're constantly cautious." Did she say, "Don't you ever just want to do something crazy?" With a tone of disappointment. Those used to make me giggle, but now they felt like unavoidable warnings. I had provided her with stability, ensuring her sense of security and a well-planned future. She appeared to care less the more I provided, even though I had been certain they were presents. I was unable to comprehend why. What had I done incorrectly? What was absent? Why wasn't I sufficient? I realized I had to take action. I had to move quickly to repair this if there was any hope at all. After some time, I made the decision that I had to take action, rather than waiting for things to miraculously become better on their own. I organized a solo weekend getaway for the two of us. In the Highlands, a hut. Avoid any distractions. No pals, no job. Only us. We could reset, I reasoned, if I could get her away from everything, including her phone and whatever was grabbing her attention. Despite her agreement, I could see she wasn't very happy. "No." "Oh, it sounds wonderful. That's really kind of you." Only a hesitant nod. I was taking the car in for an oil change, just like I had told her. I packed our suitcases that night. Hers was essentially empty, Absolutely no effort, as if she were getting ready for a weekend of hostage-taking instead of a romantic retreat. Once more, I disregarded it. We started driving the following morning. She was hooked to her phone for at least 3 of the 4 hours of the travel. I tried speaking. When her friends inquired about her job, they even brought up the stupid reality program she had become fixated with a few months prior. Yes, that's what she would say. No follow-ups. I have no queries. Her scrolling sound alone. I told myself that I was overanalyzing things, and that she was simply exhausted. The lodge itself was pleasant, quiet, isolated, and surrounded only by trees. I had imagined us relaxing, talking deeply, and perhaps even mending whatever was damaged. However, she entered, looked about a little, and said, "Do we have service out here?" "What a great thing!" Or, "Jake, this is a fantastic idea. Do we just have service? I ought to have turned around and go home." I feigned a smile instead, saying, "Yeah, but it's spotty." Most likely a good thing. She didn't respond. We hiked all day. I did, at least. Distracted, she followed, hardly glancing at the scenery. She kept fiddling with the strap of her bag when I tried to hold her hand. We eventually arrived at this stunning overlook, one of those locations when the entire world seemed to be painted in front of you. She was on her phone at the time, so I turned to talk to her. That was it. I realized then that this wasn't a phase. She wasn't aloof due to job stress or a need for privacy. I was the fool who was still attempting to make things work after she had already checked out. We sat by the fire that evening. I prepared a basic supper, potatoes with grilled chicken. Picking at it and hardly eating, she gazed into the flames as if they were the solutions to her life's questions. She hardly touched hers while I sat there eating in quiet, stealing looks at her. Everything unsaid seemed heavier than ever in the void between us. To finally get the facts out in the open, I wanted to ask her what was wrong, but something about her stance and the way she averted my eyes told me I wouldn't like the response. I simply kept the night going instead. She was offered another drink, and she accepted it without question. She swayed slightly and poured another glass. She appeared to have been keeping it in for far too long, and to be in that drunken phase where everything poured out unadulterated. Then she suddenly burst into a scathing, even derisive laugh. I wasn't accustomed to hearing her laugh like that. It wasn't friendly or lighthearted. It tasted bitter. "Are you looking for something amusing?" She tilted her head at me and muttered, "You have never captivated me." I simply acted as though she had laughed. I put down my drink and scowled. "What does that signify?" She grinned while slowly circling her drink. "Jake, you put in so much effort." "Always had." She seemed to feel sorry for me by shaking her head. "Like it will make a difference." My chest constricted. "What are you discussing?" She put her chin on her hand and leaned forward. Her eyes were blurry, yet focused on me. "Do you believe that being a decent man is sufficient? That you're someone I should desire since you're steady, trustworthy, and kind?" She laughed softly again, as if I didn't understand. I never wanted that, though. I felt a chill creep into my gut. I opened my mouth to say, "Olivia," but she waved a hand, ignoring me. You know, I used to promise myself that I would eventually come to appreciate the peaceful existence and wake up to it. A kind guy never lets me worry about anything and plans our future together. She rubbed her temple and moaned. "But Jake, my God, you realize how dull that sounds?" I remained silent. My heart felt chilly as I just gazed at her. I felt as though I was observing a complete stranger, someone I had never actually interacted with. I had the impression that the woman before me was not the one I had loved for years. She was someone who had been anticipating the opportunity to undermine me. She wasn't even sorry now that she had. She continued to chat nonchalantly, discarding all we had created, as if it were a phase she had outgrown. I desired to experience an emotion, sadness, anger, anything, but I only experienced numbness. She had been too preoccupied with her own ideas. Someone who keeps me alert and excited is what I need. Someone who doesn't adhere to every regulation. It's truly important that people ask me how my day went. She gave a head shake. I need someone else. I felt as like I had just been kicked in the chest as I sat there looking at her. "Different," I said in a hollow voice. Totally unaware of the harm she was causing, she nodded. "An individual with a little edge." someone who is occasionally careless and doesn't always act morally. It seemed as though she was finally recognizing me for who I was as she blinked at me. "You're too secure." It was there. I had been striving to be the greatest boyfriend I could be for years, hurting my back in the process. The man who helped, who encouraged, who ensured she never had to go through what I went through as a child. She was assuring me that it didn't matter at all, that it wouldn't. I clenched my teeth and swallowed hard. "You just told me this now, too." She gave a shrug. "I suppose I no longer want to pretend." Without a word, I reclined in my chair. She gazed at me. What are you waiting for? I wasn't certain. A fight, a breakdown, or even a last-ditch appeal for her to remain. However, I refused to give her that. I have nothing to offer her. I gave one nod, okay. She screwed her face in bewilderment. That's all. With a leisurely breath, I hardly gave her a glance. Is there anything else? I spoke in a bland, uninteresting tone. You've stated your position clearly. You don't want me. Thus. All right. She blinked, as if she didn't think I would handle it so well, as if she desired a response. I wasn't sure if she was acting intoxicated or actually intoxicated at the time. I reclined and gazed at her with a level composure that I knew would make her uneasy. Olivia? I refuse to grovel. I won't alter who I am to satisfy whatever fantasy you have in mind. I cocked my head a little, and I will never sit here and say I'm sorry for how I treated you. She hesitated just as she opened her mouth to speak. She seemed uncertain. I slowly got up and pushed my chair back. Intentional. I'm heading to bed. She made no attempt to stop me. When I considered it, the indicators were rather clear. At night, she avoided my calls. The name of this person kept coming up, and all of a sudden, she was always busy with activities that I wasn't involved in. I might have become a detective. Yes. She might have asked around or looked at her phone. I simply didn't care, though, as I sat there in the dark. Strange, isn't it? There's no need to attempt to win her back or find explanations. Nothing, simply empty. And I had already made up my mind by morning. She simply wasn't aware of it yet. She pretended nothing had occurred the following morning. As if it were any other morning, she yawned, stretched, and got up. As if she hadn't already ruined our relationship the previous evening. I waited for her to speak while I sat on the side of the bed and watched her walk around the cottage. She didn't. Do you remember what you said last night? I finally said. She hesitated. Jake, I was intoxicated. I can't recall much. In her eyes, I saw it. She recalled every word. She simply lacked the courage to own it. I had the option to push. Don't lie to me. I could have assured her that I wasn't a moron, that I had been aware of a problem for months. However, I didn't. I simply nodded instead. I made my decision after letting her believe I had purchased it. I would no longer stand up for her. If she wanted more, I wasn't going to plead with her to love me. Give it to her. Allow her to experience life without me bearing the burden of the connection. So, I began to back away. No more texts saying, good morning. No more inquiring about her day scheduling dates or bringing her favorite store-bought goodies home. I remained calm. I stayed warm. I simply quit. I don't believe she noticed at first. Or perhaps she did and felt a sense of relief. However, I gradually noticed the change. She began making little gestures toward me, caressing my arm while she spoke, and sitting on the couch next to me, rather than at the other end. My jokes made her laugh a bit too loudly, even the idiots who have never had a response before. It wasn't because she missed me that she was doing it. She sensed me drifting away, so she was doing it. It was no longer me who held on. When we returned home a week later, I could sense she was restless. When she thought I wasn't looking, she gave me a quick glance and bit her lip, as if she wanted to say something but wasn't sure how. Then I saw her looking at me one evening. She wasn't going through our phones when we were both seated. She was observing me. You've changed, she remarked at last. I gave her a quick look. Yes. She paused. Is everything all right? I gave a shrug. I'm all right. That response didn't sit well with her. Her fingers tightened on the blanket's edge, and I could tell. She anticipated that I would ask her what was wrong, hug her, tell her I loved her, and implore her to share her thoughts with me. I didn't. I realized I had turned the tables at that point. After a few days, I began to notice small details. Even if she had nowhere to go, she would still dress up more. She would inquire about my whereabouts, activities, and companions. She became excited when I told her one evening that I was going out to supper with my friend Ethan. "Oh," where I gave a shrug. "I'm not sure yet." She paused. "I could accompany you." That was novel. She had avoided our plans like it was a second job for the past 6 months. I simply grinned. "No, tonight is only for the boys." I could see how her jaw tightened as she attempted a chuckle. She was falling apart. I left my phone in the living room one evening. I discovered she had gone through it when I woke up. I wasn't even angry. It was just funny to me. Anything to prove that I had checked out was what she was looking for. She was looking for an excuse to feel in charge. She was without one. Then everything exploded in the most predictable way imaginable. She had been seeing someone the whole time, it turned out. It was months of full-on dating behind my back, not simply a hookup or an inebriated error. She smacked me with the classic when it all came out, which was amusing. "You were never appealing to me. You're a dull line." After 8 years of depression, I nearly burst out laughing at the desperation of that excuse. She was only attempting to hide her identity, but she had become so careless in concealing everything that it was quite uncomfortable to witness. But to be honest, it didn't hurt at all. I had just finished. However, she must have believed she had me tricked. She stopped hiding her tracks, which made me realize that I was still utterly enamored with her. Perhaps she was too preoccupied with my retreating. Perhaps she became too at ease. She did, however, leave her laptop open on the kitchen counter one evening. And there it was, her communications. I have no idea why I looked. Perhaps I already knew what I would discover. He had texted. Weeks, not just recent ones. Talks for months. I browsed with no emotion at all. I was reading the text as if I were skimming a pointless email. "I am eager to meet you once more. It was a fantastic night. Does he have any suspicions?" I inhaled deeply. Before going to bed, shut down the laptop. She wasn't awakened by me. I didn't go up against her. Since I had already made up my mind what I was going to do, I did nothing. I woke up the following morning as if it were any other day, made coffee and showered. I pretended that I wasn't going to take her out of my life entirely. I then gave my lawyer a call. I had begun the procedure before she even got out of bed. She didn't know. I wanted her to feel it, so I wasn't going to warn her. One day, before she even realized she needed to fight for me, I wanted her to wake up and realize she had lost me. She desired more. That's precisely what she was going to receive. It was not long before I discovered the truth. Ethan called me a few days after I had been in touch with my attorney. Ethan isn't the kind of person who gets sucked into drama. He is the type of person that keeps to himself and doesn't bother others. I thus felt something was off when he abruptly and hesitantly contacted me. Jake. He seemed hesitant, as if he was unsure whether to speak at all. I saw Olivia last night, and I'm not sure how to explain it. At a downtown pub, she was with a guy, and they were doing more than simply chatting. Where did I exhale after closing my eyes? He mentioned the intersection beside the booths in the rear. I experienced nothing. No shock, no rage, and no excruciating agony. The messages, the late hours, and the way she began to treat me like an afterthought are things I believe I was previously aware of. For months, I had been aware that Ethan was only validating what my intuition had been telling me. Jake, are you all right, man? He couldn't see me, but I nodded. Yes, indeed. I'm doing okay. Do you want me to take any action? No. I said I understood, and I did. I knew what I needed to do already. I informed Olivia I wouldn't be home for supper that evening and made up an excuse about working late. She only said, okay, hardly reacting, and returned to her phone. Around 9 p.m., I waited after parking my car 2 blocks from the intersection. I suspected she wouldn't have me wait for very long, but I wasn't sure how long I would be waiting there. She did really leave our apartment complex at 9:30. She was not as dressed up as she would be for a social gathering. Just jeans, no fancy dress, no high heels, a crop top. And she only ever brought that suitcase when she wasn't immediately going home. I went with her. All I needed was evidence. Just enough to keep her in view, but not near enough to be noticeable. She moved quickly, as if she had an urgent place to be. I needed to see it for myself, even though I already knew where she was heading. I waited a few minutes before following her as she entered the intersection. I watched from the shadows, staying close to the door. And there he was. I was clean cut, but the guy was the total opposite. He had a smug smile, tattoos across his arms, and a gruff exterior. He seemed to have never had to work for anything in his life. Damn, she had never looked at me the way she did when she looked at him. As if she had been waiting all day, she slid into the booth and leaned toward him right away. Without hesitation, he wrapped his arm around her, and she melted into him. For a moment, I just watched and let everything to sink in. I then pulled out my phone, took a photo, and left. No conflict, just hard-cold evidence. By the time I returned to my vehicle, my lawyer had already received the photo. Get the paperwork started. I seldom talked to Olivia over the following 2 days. At first, I wasn't sure if she noticed. She didn't appear to notice how quiet I had become since she was so engrossed in whatever illusion she was living in. I took a strong step back, ceased checking in, and began arriving home late without warning. She persisted in demanding answers, but I simply remained silent. But when I covertly transferred the majority of our joint funds into a different account, the true switch was flicked. Just defending what was rightfully mine, nothing criminal. Her entire performance shifted at that point. As if someone had switched a switch, she became attached and lovely all of a sudden. The phony "I love you" began to fall like confetti. She was discussing getaways and organizing date evenings, even recommended this romantic retreat. Her scrambling was almost comical. In fact, I declined everything. She then checked our joint account in the morning. Her eyes were filled with worry as she realized the majority of the money was gone. Priceless. Although she made an effort to appear calm, I could see that her hands were shaking as she quickly checked her phone. I was aware of her weekly spa treatments, her impulsive shopping trips, and her expensive lunches with her new buddy that were on the verge of collapsing. She continued to look at me anxiously, as if she was waiting for me to mention it. I didn't. Like every other morning, I read the news and sipped my coffee. I prepared the divorce documents a week later. When I returned home, I saw her cuddled up in her favorite place on the couch, gazing at her phone, as if it contained the solutions to every issue she had. Perhaps she was anticipating a text response from him. Perhaps she hoped this was all a terrible dream. When I stepped in, she didn't even raise her head. For a moment, I just stood there and watched. In some way, she appeared smaller, as if she had begun to feel the consequences of her actions, as if she had anticipated it. After taking the envelope out of my pocket, I let it fall on the coffee table. She flinched at the sound of paper hitting wood. She reached for her phone and put it down carefully. Her whole body tensed as she turned it over and read the lines at the top. Her eyes were wide and scared as she swallowed hard and looked up at me. Her voice cracked, "Jake, this is not required." I laughed a little dryly. "Yes? And what's the reason?" She shook her head, unable to find the right words. For something that would cause me to give up. At last, she forced a feeble grin and added, "We can figure this out. We don't have to take any severe measures." Extreme. I raised an eyebrow and repeated, "Similar to dating someone you were never genuinely interested in for years." She gave a start. "I didn't say that," she muttered. I tilted my head and crossed my arms. "In fact, you did. You simply can't recall. Or you act as though you don't." She gave a head shake. "You know I was intoxicated, Jake." "Yes, but such words come from someplace while you're intoxicated." She glanced at the papers and then looked away. I sighed and moved in closer. I responded in a calm but forceful voice. "Tell me, Olivia, you've known for how long?" She gave me a perplexed expression. "What I explained that I wasn't your type." "You've known for how long?" Her mouth parted, then closed again. She was aware that there was no correct response to it. She finally exhaled a trembling breath. "It isn't that easy." I chuckled, this time a genuine one, as she would undoubtedly say that. I shook my head and replied, "No, Olivia. It really is that easy. Her fingers gripped the envelope so firmly that the corners began to crumble as tears filled her eyes. I stopped her in her tracks. I spoke steadily and gave you everything I had. I cherished you. I centered my life around you. You were staring at me like I was a backup plan the entire time, and I thought I was making you happy, as if I were secure. She sobbed softly, but I continued. I heard you said you needed more. I went on seeing her fall apart before my eyes. Congratulations, then. You got it. You may now go get the excitement you have been seeking. She gave a head shake. Tears are streaming down now. Please, Jake. I was wrong. However we can resolve this. I repeatedly stated, no, you made a choice. Her face was wiped. She muttered, I don't know why I did it. Whatever grip she could have had on me simply crumbled. I stated plainly, you didn't wreck everything. I deserve better as you just shown. She covered her lips with her palm as she choked on a sob. I went to the door after grabbing my keys from the counter. I made one final circle around before leaving. You desired excitement, I responded in a composed tone. Final, look for it. With the sound of her weeping behind the closed door, I departed. Better than any therapy session. She did precisely what I anticipated her to do, and I attempted to concentrate on myself after all this craziness. Acted as though she was doing well. Her stage was social media. People share pictures of their evenings out, expensive cocktails and beaming faces when they need to reassure themselves and the world that everything is well. She wanted everyone to think she was enjoying her best life without me and that she had moved on with ease. For a moment, I nearly let myself think about it, almost fell for it. Perhaps she was truly content. However, life tends to catch up. According to mutual acquaintances, the man she had broken up with utterly abandoned her and lacked the maturity to finish the relationship, just stopped responding to texts. I unfollowed her, vanished without a trace. She no longer had the exhilaration she was seeking. Then her work. She had always relied on charm and justifications to get through coasting by half and asking her task. Eventually, however, the act was no longer bought. She lost her job, something to do with restructuring or downsizing. However, everyone was aware of its true meaning. Simply put, they didn't need someone who wasn't working on the project. For a short while, the friends, the ones she went out with, stayed. However, they began to vanish as the funds dried up, and she stopped being the entertaining one. 2? The persons she had put before me, one by one. When she really needed them, they weren't there. 8 months have passed since everything happened to me, and to be honest, life has been amazing. Moved into this lovely apartment in the heart of the city. It turns out that you can afford lovely things when you're not paying for someone else's shopping obsession. LOL. I resumed rock climbing and began dating Sarah, a fantastic girl from my club. Simply said, gym girls are unique. The small things we do together truly make her happy. We spent hours last week wandering the city and grabbing inexpensive tacos. Additionally, it was superior to any elaborate meal I ever had with my former partner. The finest aspect, she earns her own money and covers her own expenses. Crazy idea, huh? The most amusing aspect, last week my ex made an attempt to harm me. Can we chat, please? I only chuckled while gazing at my phone. Didn't bother to open it. Mutual friends claim that she has been couch surfing after being evicted by her cheating boyfriend. The grass wasn't greener, I suppose. My only regret in hindsight is squandering 3 years on someone who thought I was a legless ATM. However, sometimes experiencing the negative is necessary to appreciate the positive. Isn't that right? This blew up wholly. Thank you to everyone who asked guys and for all the accolades and support. Indeed, Sarah is well aware of the story. And no, I'm not going to give the ex another opportunity, LOL. Some bridges are designed to remain in flames.